An author dies 3 times. The first, which we can call the death of the author, is when they share their work with the public. The second, which we deem the death of the author, is when their career comes to an end. And the third, which must be called the death of the author, is when Ernest Hemingway commits suicide with his favorite shotgun. But we'll get to that. I can't stop. It plagues me now, day and night. This short little novel that I read in early February. I think about it all the time. I think about it more than all the time. I think about thinking about it tomorrow, and I think about what I thought of it yesterday. I've now read Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea 3 times. Once to experience it, twice to understand, and a third time to analyze. It took 3 round trips to the end of the story and back, but I dare say, I think, I finally get what it's about. And not just in a simple way. Google can tell you that much. It's about an old fisherman demonstrating the incredible power of the human will, among some other completely valid, but otherwise unhelpful, surface-level themes. I know as much because after my first trip down the streets of Hemingway's Pulitzer Prize winner, I was at a loss for words. I had been so enraptured by the seemingly simple story that I forgot to figure out what the hell it meant. So I Googled it, and nothing impactful came up. Phrases like man versus nature and man versus beast, resistance and will, all very correct, but not satiating my need to truly know what this book meant. Well, finally, I think the key is in the sharks. What sharks, you ask? And rightly so. Not many people in the modern day have read this book, and the most anyone seems to talk about it is that it's about an old man in the sea catching a big fish. Not so many people online talk about what happens after the big fish. So here, I will recap this incredible story, resisting the urge to tell every detail I love about it. That would be a long script. So, with brevity in mind, let's dive in. Santiago is an aged fisherman in the Cuban city of Havana. He has gone 84 days without catching a fish. In the first 40 days, there was a boy with him. That boy is usually just called the boy, but on 2 occasions he is called by the name Manolin. Santiago taught Manolin to fish when he was 5, but after over a month without a catch, his parents insisted he go fish elsewhere, as Santiago had been deemed Salao, meaning the worst form of unlucky. Manolin loved Santiago and wished to continue fishing with him, but it wasn't his choice, so he did what he could to support the old man from the shore. Thus, on Santiago's 85th morning without a fish, he sets out to sea, alone. He had told the boy 85 is a lucky day. The rising sun hurts his eyes as it has every morning for decades. He casts his line and begins his day's work. Finally, after 84 unsuccessful attempts, he catches a fish, an albacore. It looks as though it will weigh 10 pounds. Enough to serve as great bait, but worth very little money. He kills it, sets it aside, and continues to fish. His luck is finally turning around, or so it would seem. Another fish tugs at his line, though it is not yet hooked. He pinches the line between his thumb and forefinger, feeling as whatever fish is below passes at his bait several times. Just by the way it treats that line, how it circles around to test the bait and the particular speed at which it does so, Santiago can tell it is a marlin 100 fathoms down. Finally, it takes the bait in full, grasping it in its mouth and swimming away. He can tell by the strong pull of the line between his thumb and forefinger that it must be a large one. After a moment's wait, he grabs full hold of the line and pulls with all his might, but the fish does not rise an inch. Santiago braces the line across his back, places his feet against the wooden skiff's thwart, and pulls the line until it is so tense water droplets vibrate down it, but the fish does not come up. Instead, it begins to pull the skiff and Santiago with it quickly to the northwest. He is being towed as if a whaling ship. He would like to tie the fishing line to the boat, but he feels the fish is so strong that the line would snap if he was not able to release the tension by feeding more out whenever the fish would make a pull. And so, Santiago is forced to hold the line himself, remaining ever vigilant for the moment he will need to give the fish slack. This fish is strange. Unlike any fish Santiago has ever encountered, it just continues to pull the skiff northwest at a steady pace. Once or twice it gives a sudden lurch, keeping Santiago on his toes. At one such lurch, the line cuts his hand, but he holds fast anyway. This goes on for hours. Soon it is nightfall, and this massive marlin still pulls Santiago further and further out to sea. He is forced to eat the raw albacore he caught the first morning. He can't sleep because he must keep the fish on his line. It pulls and pulls with such strength, such diligence, such consistency, that Santiago develops this immense respect for it, going so far as to say, quote, "I wish I could feed the fish. He is my brother, but I must kill him. And I wish I was the fish, with everything he has against only my will and intelligence." The fight with the marlin continues then through another full day. During this time, Santiago recalls the feats of his youth, such as when he arm wrestled a man for a full day and night, onlookers taking bets over hours, before finally he beat his opponent in a sudden burst of strength, just in time for everyone to go to work. The townspeople called him El Campeón, the champion. The fish finally comes to the surface and makes one great leap, allowing Santiago to see him for the first time before he descends again. It is huge, the biggest fish he has ever seen, but it dives back deep, and this great and mighty fish still pulls northwest, though it is beginning to slow just slightly. He ties the oars to the boat and sets them in the water to increase the drag, and as the sun sets, there are a few short paragraphs that I have to recount in their entirety, because nothing less could display their beauty. Quote, "The fish is my friend too," he said aloud. "I have never seen or heard of such a fish, but I must kill him. I am glad we do not have to try to kill the stars. Imagine if each day a man must try to kill the moon," he thought. "The moon runs away. But if imagine a man each day should have to try to kill the sun. We were born lucky," he thought. Then he was sorry for the great fish that had nothing to eat, and his determination to kill him never relaxed in his sorrow for him. "How many people will he feed?" he thought. "But are they worthy to eat him? No, of course not. There was no one worthy of eating him, from the manner of his behavior and his great dignity. I do not understand these things," he thought. "But it is good that we do not have to try to kill the sun, or the moon, or the stars. It is enough to live on the sea and kill our true brothers." End quote. For now a second night, Santiago must hold the line as the fish continues to tow. He devises a way of holding it so he can get some sleep, but that if the fish should pull, it would wake him. He sleeps for a brief time this way before the fish finally begins to panic, pulling him awake to the front of his boat and pinning him there with the tension on the line. It jumps into the air again and again and again. The final stretch is beginning. The sun rises on his third day at sea. Soon the fish will begin to circle the boat, and Santiago will pull him ever closer with each circle. As this happens, the fish resists, still with such great power that it nearly brings Santiago, who has eaten nothing but raw fish and slept but a wink, to passing unconscious. But he endures. He, inch by inch, circle by circle, pulls the great marlin beside the boat, where he stabs it through the heart with his harpoon. Now comes the slave work, as he calls it. The marlin is so large that he knows he cannot lift it into the skiff, and even if he could, the boat would not hold its weight. He estimates it must weigh some 1,500 pounds, so instead, he ties it to the side of the boat and sets sail southeast. He is so far out at sea by now that he only has his natural navigation to lead him home because he can't see the shore and he has no compass, but he is very experienced and knows easily enough which way to go. As the first hour passes, the unavoidable happens. The sharks begin. There's blood in the water. One by one, at first, sharks appear. The first is a beautiful and dignified species, a dentuso, master predator of the sea. It takes a bite out of the marlin, and as it does, Santiago stabs it through the brain. It dies. Santiago is despondent, as he believes it has taken at least 40 pounds of the marlin with it. Yet, he rallies. Preparing for the fight he knows is coming with the fresh blood in the water, he says, quote, "But man is not made for defeat. A man can be destroyed, but not defeated." And, quote, "Fight them. I'll fight them until I die." Then, another breed of shark comes, a shovel-nosed shark species he refers to as galanos. They are not dignified. They are driven only by appetite and are known to even take bites out of humans who are not bleeding and have no smell of fish on them. It takes a chunk of the marlin as well, and he stabs it too in the brain, but being the undignified creature it is, it tosses and spins in the water, wrapping up his harpoon and tearing the rope. As it falls into the depths of the sea, it takes Santiago's weapon with it. The marlin is torn up enough now that he cannot bear to look at it. Still, he ties his knife to the end of an oar, but it kills only 2 sharks before the blade snaps. They keep coming. He now uses his club to beat them over the head, but he is too old to kill them this way. It's no use. Night sets, and one by one, sharks take hold of the marlin and eat its flesh away. Santiago breaks his club, trying to fight them, but to no avail, so he uses the tiller of the boat to club them with even less success. Soon, the sharks stop coming. There's nothing left on the fish worth eating. He tastes blood in his mouth, and he spits it into the ocean, saying, "Eat that, Galanos, and make a dream you've killed a man." In the dead of night, in contrast to his previous optimism, he begins, quote, "Bed will be a great thing. It is easy when you are beaten," he thought. "I never knew how easy it was." Finally, he returns to the land after 3 days and 3 nights empty-handed. He collapses on the way back to his run-down shack with newspaper bedding, but eventually he rises again and makes the journey home, carrying the mast of the skiff the whole way, and when he arrives, he falls into bed and sleeps. The boy, Manolin, who has been crying, brings him coffee in the morning, glad to see him alive. Santiago's first words when he wakes are as follows. "They beat me, Manolin. They truly beat me." "He didn't beat you, not the fish," Manolin responds. "No, truly, it was afterwards," Santiago finishes. On the next page, in the final paragraph of the book, a tourist couple are in town. And the woman, seeing the skeleton of the 18-foot Leviathan on the beach, asks their waiter, "What's that?" "Tiburon. Shark," the waiter was preparing to explain, but the tourist woman cuts him off. "I didn't know sharks had such handsome, beautifully formed tails." "I didn't either," her male companion says. Alright, that's a lot to unpack. The summary ran longer than I wanted it, but I truly think I couldn't spare any more details without sacrificing the integrity of the book's incredible quality. I can only hope and pray I've conveyed even the slightest sliver of the sense of overwhelming and inexplicable investment the story imbued in me when I first read it. But it's most likely you have to read it yourself to really get that, so please do. I can't recommend it enough. Anyway, you know what Hemingway had to say about the message of the book? Quote, "There isn't any symbolism. The sea is the sea, the old man is the old man, the boy is a boy, and the fish is a fish. The sharks are sharks, no better, no worse." And to that, I say, go kick the bucket, old man. The Death of the Author is a 1967 essay by the French literary critic and theorist Roland Barthes. The core idea is that an author's work is defined not by the author's intentions while writing it, but by the meaning the readers prescribe to it. The author doesn't exist or matter after a book is published. The author, in fact, dies the moment that book hits the public's shelves. My best friends rabidly hate this theory. I did too for some time, but the aforementioned Hemingway quote completely changed my mind. Imagine, if you will, a monkey slamming at the keys of a yellow typewriter. He so happens, by pure dumb luck, to write out a short novel as good or better than The Old Man and the Sea. In fact, better than any work of fiction written in the 20th century. The monkey, then, promptly looks at his aging yellow paper sitting in his funny yellow button machine and gives the hand sign his trainers have taught him means banana. Every time he sees this set of strange foreign symbols on his old yellow paper printed on a funny yellow typewriter, he thinks about banana. The monkey has decided in his mind that this soon-to-be seminal work of classic fiction therefore means banana. Is the book about bananas? I don't think so. I don't care what the monkey says. I don't even really care if the monkey was lying when he said it. He's created something larger than himself, and I don't need to take him at his word when he says his book of all books is actually just a poster with the word banana stamped on it. Now let me be very clear. I'm not calling Ernest Hemingway, the brilliant author and tortured genius, a monkey. I am saying it doesn't matter if he likes bananas. It doesn't matter that his famously straightforward and understated literary style makes it plausible for him to claim his works aren't symbolically meaningful. Whether he knows it and is lying about it, whether it was a subconscious implication, or whether I've just read the book too many times, it has more to say than a simple story about a fisherman. I feel it in the depths of my gut. If it didn't have more going on than meets the eye, I don't find it plausible that I would have carved out such a substantial chunk of my brain to think about it nonstop for months. The fact is, Hemingway is dead. Today, sure, but in truth, the very day he published this work, he died. The death of the author has transpired, and I'm going to move on with my analysis. Thank you for rejecting the absolutely bananas claim that this book has no symbolism. Okay, let's get down and dirty here. I've been claiming to know what this book is about, yet very clearly, I have not actually stated what that's supposed to be, so here it is. I firmly believe that Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea is an autobiographical career allegory. That is to say, it is an allegory about Hemingway's pursuit of the literary arts and how he felt of his career in the 8 weeks he spent writing this book. Maybe he didn't know that's what it would be about, but that's what it is. To prove this, we'll look at his career up to The Old Man and the Sea being published in 1952. His first major book, The Sun Also Rises, released in 1926 to mixed, if slightly positive, critical reception. The greatest critique levied against it was that it was boring in some way, which I suppose came largely out of a dislike for its characters, as the people the book is about were not of a popular sort at the time. Those willing to look past this supposed flaw praised the book as a good work, and in particular, they lauded Hemingway's unique and economical prose as extremely refreshing amongst a literary world obsessed with intellectualism and some undue amount of snobbery. This was, for a first major book, a big win for Hemingway. It established his now legendary style of writing as something that could be very successful for him, and he would take that style and run with it. In 1929, at the age of 30, Hemingway published A Farewell to Arms, to now great critical reception, and biographer James Mello believes this book established him as one of the foremost American writers. Of course, there were many short stories published in between those major works, mind you. I'm mostly focusing on his fictional, full-length novels. The one exception I make to that is The Green Hills of Africa, which was a non-fiction account of one of Hemingway's actual trips. It received a lot of negative reviews, which he believed killed its chances of success, despite him considering it a good book. This left him despondent, and it began a downward trend to his career. Hemingway's only fictional novel to be published in the 1930s during the Great Depression was To Have and Have Not, published in 1937. Again here, his career falters. To Have and Have Not received many very negative reviews, causing Hemingway to become depressed and making it difficult for him to write. In spite of this, following his recent second divorce and subsequent third marriage, he finished writing and published For Whom the Bell Tolls in 1940, which saw great financial success, selling 500,000 copies within 9 months, and it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. It was very well received by many critics, and yet, a modest but not unnoticeable number of reviewers at the time were seemingly splitting hairs over the book. Some were nitpicking its length and pacing, others its romantic idealism or political messaging. A handful were even targeting Hemingway's previously renowned economical style. In fact, since the publication of The Green Hills of Africa, the world of literary critics had started to decide that Hemingway's prose was no longer refreshing, but stale. This was his third consecutive major work to be discredited by major reviewers, and it seemed to hurt him emotionally. I'm sure having a Pulitzer dangled in front of his face just to be denied it didn't help with that. After this, Hemingway himself said he was, quote, out of business as a writer, supposedly leaving his writing career behind, having fallen from grace in the literary world. Many claimed he had soiled his legacy. Hemingway and his new and final fourth wife, Mary, then suffered a long series of bad luck. Mary had an ectopic pregnancy. Hemingway badly injured his knee and received a very bad head wound in a car accident. Mary broke both her ankles. Hemingway's son suffered a terrible head wound and was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and with mental illness running in Hemingway's side of the family, he surely blamed himself for his son's condition on some level. Then, all of Hemingway's best literary friends began to die off. Yeats, Ford, Fitzgerald, Sherwood Anderson, James Joyce, Gertrude Stein, Max Perkins, they all died in quick succession. He suffered high blood pressure, constant migraines, and diabetes, mostly as a result of his life of head injuries and battlefield wounds and chronic drinking. He became extremely depressed, and despite all of this, he wrote and then published his first major work in 10 years, 1950's Across the River and Into the Trees. This was frankly his worst reception yet. People claimed it made a mockery of his unique style. Nobody saw it as beautiful as Hemingway did, according to him, because the critics ripped it apart down to its bare bones. They said his career was finished, his legacy tarnished, his relevancy gone, his life over the past 6 odd years had pitfall after pitfall, and he was beginning to feel sallow. Truly, he felt the worst kind of unlucky. Reviews like this in the past left Hemingway despondent, but in this case, the reviews of Across the River and Into the Trees, which Hemingway still defended as a good book, made him angry. He began attacking the critics, dismissing their credentials, claiming they didn't understand the book, and personally responding to particular claims with dismissive remarks. He was practically clubbing them over the head for ripping apart his work. You see what I'm getting at? He was so angry, in fact, that he sat down and in 8 weeks flat wrote The Old Man and the Sea, a book about an old man past his prime, past his years of great successes, attempting to reel in his greatest dream, the most dignified and noble thing he's ever found, and he succeeds. He achieves the dream. All he had to do after was bring it home. But in his waning years, he couldn't do it. He couldn't fend off the ravenous detractors, taking away from the beautiful and simple, straightforward and determined nobility of that dream. By the time he got home, it was too late. The dream was gone. Hemingway was a fan of straightforward, and I really want to honor that, so here it is, plain and simple. Hemingway is Santiago. When he wrote the book, he had even lived in Cuba years before. He owned a boat there. Hemingway, after years of drought, sets out on the back end of a bad luck streak to end all bad luck streaks. He was a writer, gone a decade without a successful work, like a poor fisherman gone months without catching a fish. He sets sail on what's supposed to finally be his lucky day, the 85th day without a fish, without a work he can be proud of. And he does it. He catches what he believes to be the big one, the fish, to end all his bad luck, to return honor to his name past his prime, so that his few remaining loved ones like Manolin can be around him again without feeling shame, so they can call him the champion again. The truth is, Manolin never felt shame. That was in Santiago's head, in Hemingway's head. He catches a fish. he believes to be the most valuable, the most noble, the most dignified. Like achieving the dream of writing another great work, the most noble and dignified thing Hemingway, a war hero, thought he could do. So he does it. He works on it for years and he finishes it, believing it to be the final end to all his failures. All he had to do was bring it home, but the reviews start coming in. They've seen Hemingway falter already. They know he's past his best years. There's blood in the water and they can smell it. They take his newly written book, a book only he got the chance to see the beauty in before those damned sharks ripped it apart. But he insisted it was good. He stood by it. He said he wasn't beaten. Man is not made for defeat. A man can be destroyed, but not defeated. Fight them, I'll fight them until I die, he says. He bashes the sharks with everything he's got, but it's no use. He's old. His mind is fading. His harpoon, his best weapon, sits at the bottom of a deep sea. And when they've had their meal, when the sharks are fat and full and he is tired, he spits into the ocean, the ether where the critical sharks reside, and he says, "Eat that, Galanos, and dream you've killed a man. It is easy when you are beaten," he says. "I never knew how easy it was." He couldn't bear to look at his dream anymore, so he went to bed. He wakes but briefly to say, "They beat me, Manolin. They truly beat me." His loved ones say back, "It didn't beat you, not the fish, not the dream, not the goal, not the writing." And he responds, "No, truly, it was after." And the common armchair literarian, while Hemingway sleeps in his shack on newspaper bedding, a failure. Those damn tourists, the literary tourists, sit in their restaurant over the sea and ask their waiter what the pile of bones on the beach is. And before he can even explain, they focus in on the word shark. Tiburon. The critic. And they see the last vestige of the beauty of writing. The last bit of a great fish, its tail end. And they say, "I didn't know sharks had such handsome, beautifully formed tails." As if any prominent critic ever wrote one iota as well about anything as Hemingway writes, an old man on a skiff, alone in the sea. Hemingway poured his soul into this work. He called it the best I can ever write for all of my life. It worked. Critics raved. It won him a Pulitzer and 2 years later a Nobel Prize. It sold 5 million copies in 1 month, and it sat on the New York Times bestsellers for 6. It was the fastest selling book ever written. And it wasn't enough. Hemingway, Santiago, they said it themselves already. They beat me. Eventually, when the hype died down and the sales slowed, the blood was still in the water. A handful of critics said it was vastly overrated. Today, people on Reddit still call it boring. People on Goodreads call it toxic masculinity. Environmentalists say he plundered the ocean senselessly to no one's benefit, as if they'd rather he kill the sun or the moon or the goddamn stars. How quickly they move on, when they don't even know what the book is about. Why would they? I had to read it 3 times to even start. They barely read it once. Hemingway never published another fictional work, or any major work for that matter. His career was dead in the water. It ended on a high note, at least. He wouldn't be so lucky. In the decade, slightly less than, actually, that followed The Old Man and the Sea, Hemingway began to deteriorate. He was working on several projects, none he would finish except a brief 40,000-word piece for Time magazine on bullfighting. While he was writing these, he struggled greatly to organize his work, so he called in longtime friend and author A.E. Hotchner to help him get his stuff together. Hotchner found Hemingway to be, quote, unusually hesitant, disorganized, and confused, and suffering badly from failing eyesight. They got the Time article done, but not much else. Hemingway left Cuba for the last time, going up to New York in a small office to try and work. He didn't get much done there either. I'm going to take the next bit straight from Wikipedia. Soon after, he left New York, traveling without Mary to Spain, to be photographed for the front cover of Life magazine. A few days later, the news reported that he was seriously ill and on the verge of dying, which panicked Mary until she received a cable from him telling her, quote, reports false, en route Madrid. Love, Papa. He was, in fact, seriously ill and believed himself to be on the verge of a breakdown. He took to his bed for days, falling near deathly silent. The next month, he returned to New York, where he refused to leave Mary's apartment, believing he was being watched. She took him to Idaho to see a trusted physician, George Saviers. The rest, more or less, straight from Wikipedia, too. Quote, he was concerned about finances, he missed Cuba, his books, and his life there, and he fretted that he would never return to retrieve the manuscripts that he had left in a bank vault. He believed those manuscripts, that would be posthumously published as Islands in the Stream and True at First Light, were lost. He became paranoid, believing that the FBI was actively monitoring his movements in Idaho. Mary was unable to care for her husband, and it was anathema for a man of Hemingway's generation to accept he suffered from mental illness. At the end of November, Saviers flew him to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota on the pretext that he was to be treated for hypertension. He was checked in under Saviers' name to maintain anonymity. Myers writes that an aura of secrecy surrounds Hemingway's treatment at the Mayo, but confirms that he was treated with electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, as many as 15 times in December of 1960. Reynolds gained access to Hemingway's records at the Mayo, which document 10 ECT sessions. The doctors in Rochester told Hemingway the depressive state for which he was being treated may have been caused by his long-term use of reserpine and Ritalin. Of the ECT therapy, Hemingway told Hotchner, quote, what is the sense of ruining my head and erasing my memory, which is my capital, and putting me out of business? It was a brilliant cure, but we lost the patient. End quote. In late January 1961, he was sent home, as Myers writes, in ruins. Asked to provide a tribute to President John F. Kennedy in February, he could only provide a few sentences after a week's effort. A few months later, on April 21st, Mary found Hemingway with a shotgun in the kitchen. She called Saviers, who admitted him to the Sun Valley Hospital under sedation. Once the weather cleared, Saviers flew again to Rochester with his patient. Hemingway underwent 3 more electroshock treatments during that visit. He was released at the end of June and was home in Ketchum on June 30th. 2 days later, Hemingway, quote, quite deliberately, shot himself with his favorite shotgun in the early morning hours of July 2nd, 1961. End Wikipedia quotation. Here's the honest to God truth as I understand it. Most of the greats are condemned to a life of suffering. Geniuses with a history of mental illness, which I guess is most of them, have it worst. Hemingway had his flaws. He grew up in the most tumultuous time in history. He suffered so many grievous injuries, so many near-death experiences over his life, but it wasn't the physical stuff that killed him. It was mental. When I told my best friends about The Old Man and the Sea after I read it for the first time, they knew nothing about it before my summary, and in fact, they knew almost nothing about Hemingway, except for one thing. One of them joked, "I see why Hemingway killed himself." It's a joke I like to think Hemingway would have laughed at, but regardless of whether or not it's funny, it just shows that today my generation remembers Hemingway not for his works, but for his suicide. I think most young people who know anything about him only know how he ended. I was the same way before this book took over my life. That was all I knew. Here's what I know now. An author dies 3 times. Once when they first publish, once when they finish publishing, and once when they finish. I tell this story today because sometimes I worry the last one is all that counts. I'm Nelson Capers. Thank you for watching.